The courtroom in downtown Chicago fell silent when 9-year-old Emma turned to the man in shackles who had shot her father, leaving him paralyzed. "If you let my daddy go from the prison of his hatred, I promise God will let you walk free from yours." The judge was about to intervene when the impossible happened. Robert Mitchell, paralyzed from the waist down for 3 years, began moving his toes. The man who shot him, Marcus Thompson, fell to his knees sobbing as chaos erupted in the courtroom. But what happened next transformed a trial for attempted murder into the most extraordinary story of forgiveness and healing America had ever witnessed. Because sometimes forgiveness has the power to heal not just the soul, but the body itself. The Cook County Criminal Court was packed that November morning. Courtroom 7, with its dark oak panels and the seal of Illinois justice, hosted one of Chicago's most followed trials in recent years. Robert Mitchell, 45, former neurosurgeon at Northwestern Memorial Hospital, sat in his wheelchair in the area reserved for victims. Beside him, his daughter Emma, 9 years old, wearing her blue school dress and blonde braids her mother had carefully done that morning before letting her in. Across the courtroom, in the defendant's box, Marcus Thompson stared into emptiness. 38 years old, once a skilled mechanic at a Ford dealership, now wearing the orange jumpsuit of Cook County Jail. The chains on his wrists clinked every time he moved, a metallic sound that filled the courtroom's silences. 3 years earlier, on a March evening, their lives had collided tragically. Marcus had lost his job. His wife had left with their kids. His house was foreclosed. Desperate and drunk, he'd attempted to rob the pharmacy below the Mitchells' Lincoln Park townhouse. Robert had come down to help after hearing the pharmacist's screams. In the struggle, Marcus had fired. The bullet had severed Robert's spinal cord at the second lumbar vertebra. Since that day, Robert hadn't walked. His brilliant career as a neurosurgeon was over. The hands that had saved lives now struggled to hold a pen. Depression had consumed him for months, transforming him into a shadow of the man he'd been. Only Emma could still draw out occasional smiles when she'd climb onto his wheelchair to hug him, whispering that he was still her superhero. The prosecutor, District Attorney James Harrison, rose for his closing argument. An imposing man in his 60s, his booming voice filled the courtroom without need for a microphone. He painted Marcus as a remorseless criminal, a man who'd destroyed a family for a few $100s. He asked for the maximum sentence, 25 years for attempted murder and armed robbery. Throughout the speech, Emma never took her eyes off Marcus. There was something in his eyes that deeply troubled her. It wasn't evil she saw, but a pain so profound it seemed to have emptied his soul. The eyes of a man who'd lost everything, even before he'd pulled that trigger. Emma's mother, Sarah, sat behind them, rigid with anger. For 3 years, she'd watched her husband fade day by day, had to explain to Emma why Daddy couldn't play soccer anymore, why he cried at night when he thought no one could hear. Hatred for Marcus Thompson consumed her almost as much as despair. When it was the defense's turn, the public defender, a young woman named Jennifer Rodriguez, did her best to humanize Marcus. She spoke of his difficult childhood on Chicago's South Side, his alcoholic father who beat him, his wife who'd left taking his children, 7-year-old Jamal and 5-year-old Tiana. She told how Marcus had lost everything: job, family, home, dignity. That night, he hadn't gone out to harm anyone, but because he saw no other way out of his desperation. Marcus listened motionlessly, eyes fixed on the floor. He hadn't spoken during the entire trial, refusing to testify in his own defense. He seemed to have accepted his fate, as if 25 years in prison were still too light a punishment for what he'd done. That's when something unexpected happened. Emma stood up from her chair, slipping from her mother's grasp as she tried to hold her back. With determined steps for a 9-year-old, she crossed the courtroom toward the defendant's box. Judge Patricia Williams was about to call for order when Emma stopped in front of Marcus's box. The silence in the courtroom was total, everyone holding their breath, waiting to see what this child would do. Emma looked up at Marcus, who for the first time met her eyes. What the man saw shook him. There was no hatred, no anger. There was a compassion so pure it seemed impossible in a child who'd seen her father destroyed by him. With a crystalline voice that resonated in the silent courtroom, Emma spoke. "Mr. Marcus, I know you didn't mean to hurt my daddy. I know you were desperate because you lost your babies. I still have my daddy, even though he can't walk. But you lost Jamal and Tiana." Sarah stood to stop her daughter, but Robert grabbed her arm. Something extraordinary was happening, something that went beyond logic and human justice. Emma continued, and her next words stunned everyone. "My daddy taught me that Jesus said to love our enemies. At first I didn't understand. How can I love someone who hurt daddy? But then I understood something. Hate is a prison. Daddy is a prisoner of his wheelchair, but also of his hatred for you. And you're a prisoner not just of jail, but of your hatred for yourself." Marcus began to tremble. Tears streaked his face as he listened to this child speak truths no adult had had the courage to voice. Emma turned to her father. "Daddy, please forgive him. Not for him, but for you, for us. The hate is killing you more than the paralysis. I see you fading every day. Not because your legs won't move, but because your heart has hardened." Robert was stunned. His 9-year-old daughter was saying aloud what he knew deep down but refused to admit. The hatred was consuming him more than the physical disability. Emma looked back at Marcus. "And you, Mr. Marcus, you need to forgive yourself. I know you replay that moment every night. I know you wish you could go back, but you can't. Nobody can. We can only move forward." Then she said the words that would change everything. "If you let my daddy go from the prison of his hatred, I promise God will let you walk free from yours. And maybe daddy will really be able to stand up." The courtroom was in tears. Even the bailiff, a man who'd seen everything in 30 years of service, was wiping his eyes. Judge Williams struggled to maintain professional composure. Robert looked at his daughter, then Marcus, then Emma again. Something broke inside him, like a dam giving way after years of pressure. Tears began to flow, tears he hadn't shed, even when the doctors told him he'd never walk again. With a voice broken by emotion, Robert spoke for the first time in court. "Marcus, I forgive you." The words were simple, but the effect was seismic. Marcus collapsed to his knees in the defendant's box, sobbing like a child. Years of guilt, remorse, and self-destruction poured out in crying that seemed to have no end. But what happened next left everyone breathless. Robert was still speaking the words of forgiveness when he felt something he hadn't experienced in 3 years. Sensation in his legs. Not pain, not tingling, but warmth. A warmth that started at the base of his spine and radiated down his thighs. His eyes widened. Sarah, who knew him better than anyone, immediately understood something extraordinary was happening. "Robert, what's going on?" Robert looked down at the legs that had been inert for 3 years. With a trembling voice, he whispered, I feel something." District Attorney Harrison, who was also a trained physician before his legal career, rushed to Robert. "What exactly do you feel?" "Warmth and—" "Wait." Robert concentrated with the intensity he once used in the operating room. Then, before the incredulous eyes of everyone present, the toes on his right foot moved. A small movement, almost imperceptible, but undeniably voluntary. The courtroom erupted. Some people screamed, others cried. Still others fell to their knees praying. Judge Williams banged her gavel, trying to restore order, but it was impossible to contain the collective emotion in the face of what appeared to be a miracle. Emma hugged her father, crying with joy. "Daddy, you did it! Forgiveness set you free!" Marcus, still on his knees in the defendant's box, watched the scene with wonder mixed with disbelief. His lips moved in silent prayer, the first he'd spoken since he was a child when his grandmother took him to church. Harrison, with his dual expertise, took control of the situation. "Your Honor, I request an immediate recess. Mr. Mitchell must be taken to the hospital immediately for tests." The judge, still visibly shaken, agreed. "Court is adjourned until tomorrow morning. I order that Mr. Mitchell be taken to Northwestern Memorial for necessary examinations." But Robert refused to leave without first approaching Marcus. With Sarah and Harrison's help, the wheelchair was brought near the defendant's box. Robert extended his hand through the bars. Marcus hesitated, then shook it. The contact lasted only seconds, but in those moments, something profound passed between them. Understanding, forgiveness, shared humanity. "Marcus," said Robert, "what happened 3 years ago was terrible. But perhaps it had to happen so we could all learn something. I learned that forgiveness is more powerful than hate. You learned that desperation is never the final word. And Emma taught us that children see truths we adults are too proud to admit." Marcus could only whisper, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "I know," Robert replied, "and now we can both begin to heal." As Robert was wheeled from the courtroom, he turned one last time to Marcus. "Whatever the sentence, know that you have my forgiveness. And when you get out, if you want, you can meet the man you were meant to be before life overwhelmed you." The ambulance that took Robert to Northwestern Memorial was escorted by a spontaneous crowd. The news had already spread. Something extraordinary had happened at the Chicago courthouse. Social media exploded with videos from the trial. The miracle of forgiveness became a worldwide trending topic within hours. At Northwestern Memorial Hospital, the medical team was buzzing. Dr. Michael Chen, chief of neurology, and Robert's former colleague, personally supervised the tests. MRI, electromyography, nerve conduction tests. Every possible examination was performed with obsessive precision. The results left the doctors stunned. The spinal cord, which MRIs from 3 years ago showed completely severed, now showed signs of what appeared to be neural regeneration. It was scientifically impossible, yet the images were unequivocal. New neural connections were forming, bypassing the original injury like streams of water finding new paths around an obstacle. Dr. Chen called an emergency press conference. "What we're observing defies our medical understanding. Dr. Mitchell's spinal cord shows signs of regeneration that modern science considers impossible."
Enjoying the story? Give it a little like, and don't forget to subscribe. Now then, let's carry on.
I cannot explain it in purely medical terms. What I can say is that Robert is recovering sensation and, to a small extent, mobility in his lower limbs. Meanwhile, at Cook County Jail, Marcus Thompson was experiencing his own transformation. After years of silence and self-imposed isolation, he began talking to the prison chaplain, Father Patrick O'Brien. He told of his life, his mistakes, the desperation that had led to that tragic night. Father Patrick listened with compassion, then said, "Marcus, the forgiveness you receive today isn't just from Robert. It's an invitation to forgive yourself and start over. Your life didn't end with that gunshot. Maybe this is where it can truly begin." Marcus asked to write a letter to his children, Jamal and Tiana, whom he hadn't seen in 4 years. His ex-wife, Keisha, had cut all contact after his arrest, but now, after what had happened in court, Marcus felt he had to at least try. The letter was simple and direct. "Dear Jamal and Tiana, it's Daddy. I know I let you down. I know I destroyed our family. I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. I just want you to know there's not a day I don't think about you. Today a brave little girl taught me that love is stronger than hate, that forgiveness can heal even the deepest wounds. I hope someday you can find it in your hearts to forgive me. I'll always love you, Daddy." The letter reached Keisha through the defense attorney. The woman read it and cried. For the first time in 4 years, she saw in her ex-husband's handwriting something that had been missing for so long: hope. That evening, while Robert was making his first physical therapy attempts with surprising results, Emma prayed in the hospital chapel. Sarah found her there, kneeling before the statue of Mary. "What are you doing, sweetheart?" "Thanking God, Mom, and praying for Mr. Marcus and his children. They need to find each other, like we found Daddy again." Sarah hugged her daughter, marveling at the purity of her heart. "How were you so brave today?" Emma looked at her with innocent eyes. "I wasn't brave, Mom. I just told the truth. Forgiveness heals. You saw it, too." The next day, the courtroom was even more crowded. Journalists from around the world had come to witness what many called the miracle trial. Robert arrived still in his wheelchair, but something had changed. He had a light in his eyes that had been missing for years, and when the physical therapist helped him get situated, he moved his legs slightly on his own. Judge Williams opened the session with unusual gravity. "In 30 years on the bench, I have never witnessed anything like what occurred yesterday in this courtroom. The law must reckon with justice, but also with mercy, with forgiveness, with the possibility of redemption." Before pronouncing the sentence, she did something unprecedented. She asked Marcus to stand and speak, if he wished. Marcus stood trembling. For the first time since the trial began, he spoke. "Your Honor, what I did is unforgivable. I destroyed the life of a good man. I traumatized an innocent child. I devastated a family. I deserve the harshest punishment." He paused, then continued. "But yesterday, that child and her father gave me something I didn't think was possible: forgiveness. I didn't deserve it. I wasn't looking for it. I didn't even hope for it. Yet, they gave it to me. And that has changed me more than any punishment could." He turned to Robert and Emma. "Dr. Mitchell, Emma, you saved me, not from prison, but from something worse: the hell of hopeless remorse. Whatever the sentence, I'll dedicate every day I have left to earning the forgiveness you've given me." Judge Williams pronounced the sentence. The court recognizes the severity of the crime committed. However, it also considers the mitigating circumstances, the defendant's state of desperation, and above all the exceptional journey of forgiveness and reconciliation witnessed in this courtroom. Therefore, I sentence Marcus Thompson to 8 years in prison, 3 of which have already been served. I further order that the last 2 years may be commuted to community service at healthcare facilities, where the defendant can put to use the redemption journey he has begun. The courtroom remained silent. 8 years instead of 25. It was a sentence that reflected not just the law, but grace. District Attorney Harrison stood. "Your Honor, in light of the extraordinary events we've witnessed, the prosecution will not appeal." Marcus cried again, but this time they were tears of gratitude. It meant he could be out on community service in 3 years. He'd have a chance to see his children again, to rebuild something. Robert asked to speak. "Your Honor, when Marcus gets out, if the court allows, I'd like him to do his community service at the foundation I'm creating for rehabilitation of people with spinal injuries. Who better than him can understand the pain of those who've lost everything?" The proposal left everyone speechless. The victim offering a future to his attacker. It was something beyond all human logic. Emma stood once more. "Mr. Marcus, when you get out, you can see Jamal and Tiana again. And if they want, they can come play with me, so they won't be alone anymore." Keisha, Marcus's ex-wife, was in the courtroom. She stood trembling. "Marcus, what you did was terrible. But what I've seen today, maybe it's time I learn to forgive too. The children need their father. When you get out, you can see them." 6 months after the verdict, Robert Mitchell walked with crutches through the new rehabilitation center of the Mitchell Foundation for Neurological Recovery. His progress had been steady and surprising. Doctors spoke of a unique case in world medical literature, but for Robert and his family, it was simply the power of forgiveness continuing to work. Emma had become a reluctant minor celebrity. Her story had inspired millions worldwide. She received letters from children and adults telling her how her example had helped them forgive wrongs suffered, to free themselves from the weight of hatred. But she remained the same simple child, preferring to play with dolls rather than give interviews. Marcus, from prison, had begun a course of study. He'd enrolled in college, studying nursing. He wanted to prepare for when he'd be released, to be useful at Robert's foundation. Every week he wrote to his children, and they had begun to respond, small steps toward a reconciliation that had seemed impossible. One particular day, Robert received a call from the Vatican. Pope Francis had heard their story and wanted to meet them. The private audience was emotional. The Pope embraced Emma, saying, "Little apostle of forgiveness, you've taught the world what Jesus always told us, but what we struggle to put into practice." To Robert he said, "You are living proof that forgiveness is not weakness, but strength, not surrender, but victory." And when he heard about Marcus, he asked that a message be delivered. God never tires of forgiving. It is men who tire of asking for forgiveness. You had the courage to accept it. Now live in a way worthy of this gift. 2 years later, the day Marcus began his community service at the foundation, Robert was waiting at the entrance, no longer in a wheelchair, but standing, supported by a cane. The recovery wasn't complete, probably never would be, but he could walk, could live an almost normal life. The two men embraced. A long embrace, mixing pain and healing, past and future, fall and redemption. Marcus worked with total dedication. His story inspired patience. If he and Robert had been able to forgive each other and move forward, then anything was possible. He became a bridge between patients and medical staff, understanding the pain of those who'd lost everything because he himself had gone through that hell. Jamal and Tiana, Marcus's children, began visiting the foundation, at first shy and wary, then increasingly open. Emma kept her promise. She became their friend, included them in her games, made them feel less alone. Watching the 3 children play together, no one would have imagined the story that connected them. One afternoon, as Robert and Marcus watched the children playing in the foundation's garden, Marcus said, "Dr. Mitchell, not a day goes by that I don't wonder why you forgave me." Robert smiled. "At first I thought I did it for Emma, to free her from the poison of hate. Then I understood I did it for myself, to free myself from the prison I'd locked myself in. But now I know the truth. I did it because it was the right thing." Forgiveness doesn't erase the past, but it allows a future. And the physical miracle? Robert reflected, doctors have their theories about neural plasticity, about the mind-body connection, but I know what I felt in that moment. When I spoke the words, "I forgive you," it was as if invisible chains broke, not just in my soul, but in my body too. I can't explain it scientifically, but I know it's real. That evening, during the extended family dinner that had become a weekly tradition, Emma proposed a toast with her orange juice to forgiveness, which turns enemies into friends and the impossible into possible. Everyone toasted, and in that moment, in that room full of people whom fate had united in the most improbable way, there was living proof that love and forgiveness are the most powerful forces in the universe. The final scene of this extraordinary story occurred 3 years later, when Marcus completed his journey. Robert organized a celebration at the foundation. There were the patients Marcus had helped, the medical staff who'd come to appreciate him, Keisha, and the children who'd found their father again, Sarah and Emma, who'd gained an extended family. During the celebration, Emma, now 14, took the floor. 5 years ago, in a courtroom, I made a promise. I said, if we let go of hate, we'd all be set free. Look around. We're all here, standing, free. Not just Daddy, who learned to walk again. Not just Marcus, who found his children again. But all of us who learned that forgiveness is stronger than any sentence, that love always wins over hate. She turned to Marcus and Robert, now colleagues and, incredibly, friends. You two are proof that God can transform even the most terrible tragedy into something beautiful. Thank you for believing me when I asked you to forgive. Robert and Marcus looked at each other, two men whom fate had crashed together in the most violent way and who now stood side by side, witnesses to a miracle that continued every day. As the sun set over Chicago, painting the foundation's windows gold, everyone present knew they had witnessed something unique. The story of how a 9-year-old girl had triggered a chain of forgiveness that had healed not just bodies, but above all, souls. And in that Chicago courtroom where it all began, a commemorative plaque still reminds all who pass. In this courtroom, forgiveness defeated hatred, and the impossible became possible. May it inspire all who seek justice and mercy. Like this story, if you believe in the transformative power of forgiveness, comment which moment of the story touched you most. Share to spread the message that forgiveness can heal the impossible. Subscribe for more stories of redemption, miracles, and second chances. Forgiveness is not weakness. It's the greatest strength that exists. It doesn't erase the past, but frees the future. It doesn't deny justice, but completes it with mercy. And sometimes, just sometimes, when forgiveness is truly sincere, the impossible can happen. Not only do souls heal, but bodies rise up, and what was dead comes back to life. Both